now for the next 10-15 minutes is a nice little display of some of the lighter armour we've got here today. So we've mentioned some of the things we've seen before, but we've got 432, which again, for Britain, coming around now, 2 of them there, normally without the turrets. When they were in Berlin, they dropped these turrets, Fox turrets, on the top of the 432s. Earlier, we used to call it an APC, an Armoured Personnel Carrier. The Army loves abbreviations. Armoured Personnel Carrier, section of infantry in the back. This was a battle taxi to take you to where the fighting was going on and drop the soldiers off. So the idea there was they didn't fight from inside the vehicle, but the whole series of variants, about 6,000 of the vehicles ended up being... We're seeing 434 variants driving around, and you'll notice they've actually got a crane on the back, and the idea with the crane is that it could actually lift a Chieftain power pack, and actually be able to slot that out in the field, because as we've heard already, the Chieftain was a fairly unreliable vehicle, and sadly had a breakdown on the service side. So having those going around, but we've also got the Abbot, and that's a bit of self-propelled artillery. Second World War British self-propelled artillery, the Sexton. And if you see it going around, like we said earlier, everything that looks like a tank is not necessarily a tank. It's got the same engine and running gear as the 432, but it's got a 105mm howitzer on the top. And the idea being that in that turret, you can carry along with you a different range of shells to fire, but different bag charges to change to the moment. It's got its gun in a cradle. It would normally drive that in a lock. When it's ready to deploy, that 8 rounds a minute, which is a fair rate of fire. And the idea being, and amazingly, in its service life, Abbot never fired its gun in anger. We never actually had to use it. Just like Chieftain never fired its gun in anger against an enemy. There. And again, that 30mm Rolls tank is quite a powerful bit of kit. They start the first prototyping. Doesn't come into service until early 1990s. Tracked armour for reconnaissance, or do we want wheeled armour for reconnaissance? And sometimes they used both in service at the same time. Wheels, quicker, very good on the road, much more mobile, goes on for longer. Tracked, great for getting to places wheels can't always get to. And there's times the idea of the light tank effect. In other words, Scorpion, Sabre, Scimitar, they really look like a war-fighting vehicle that can do some damage. Tracks also, I mentioned earlier, psychological impact. That's why we didn't take tracked vehicles to Northern Ireland. That they were considered too warlike to be used for the trouble. Only once in Northern Ireland the tracked vehicles go there, and that was when we took as part of something called Operation Motorman, where they were used to knock barriers out of the way and things like that. But on the whole, there's this sort of psychological impact. If you've got to using tracks on the streets of Britain, it felt like we'd gone a bit too far. I mentioned earlier most of the CBRT family was powered by a Jaguar car engine, slightly altered from the famous E-Type Jaguar. It was about the only size engine with enough power they could get that fitted in the space in the front of the vehicle down the side of the driver. They were trying to keep the weight down, not just to make it air portable, but under the track of that vehicle, the ground pressure is actually less than the weight of a human foot. And famously in the Falklands campaign, when they took some of the Scorpions and CBRT family out to the Falklands, one of them parked on what they thought was ground. It actually turned out to be a frozen bog. And the vehicle... The ice, it was only when the commander dropped off the side of the vehicle, he fell straight through the ice because the ground pressure beneath his feet was that much more. clever a track can be to... You look at earlier vehicles like the Carrier going past us, they're not. They're what they call aggressive track. And if you've got aggressive track, touching the ground, not the rubber pad in between. And the danger is there with raw metal, hot day. Now we've been enjoined by a few other bits and pieces coming out. We've got a half track there towing a 17-pounder and vehicles on the same running gear, and sometimes literally by converting the same M113 vehicles. So we'll see the same running gear, same thing, but they use it as a load carrying vehicle. We've got a large... Now we mentioned earlier, combat engineer tractor, lots of hydraulics on it. As was mentioned earlier on, a real problem to keep going. Amazingly enough, like so many of these things, there's probably more now running as private hands for longer than there were when they were in the army. The army has a tendency, you have full speed that are poised to be put them at their limits all the time, because you don't necessarily have the access to the spare parts to replace them. Constant drives is commonality of spare parts. Can we use the same wheels on? Can we put the same fuel in? Can we end up using all the same types of things? There's a great benefit for a military if you can start doing that. Even only small wins, being able to use the same tyres on different vehicles means that you've got less spares to have to hold. We would use this phrase, legacy issue platforms. In other words, vehicles that have been in service, like the FV433, for quite some time in the British military, and every now and again they have to think, are we going to make more track for those vehicles, or how are we going to find put it for a bit further without spending too much money? And you can imagine in this day and age, if you've got a vehicle like the FV432, that first went into service